Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cynthia, and I'm here to do a layout for us. And like is starting to happen with a lot of my readings lately, it's the channeled message coming through first ahead of the reading for someone has to do with I'm having a story from my own life come up, and it's happening quite a bit, so I'm going with it, and I'm trying to be less insecure about that. So there's a feeling of, and I'll get into this a little bit without getting too preachy, but there's a feeling that you're experiencing, if the people that I'm picking up on, of extraction. And extraction is a concept in kind of just economic and social justice circles around capitalism and an extraction economy and extraction of labor. It's just the concept of extraction, right? Like mining or taking from a resource. And you are in a position of feeling like a fatigue or like you can't replenish your energy. And I think what's happening is that you're experiencing that feeling of extraction. And settler colonialism or extraction and conquering is, white Europeans are not the only ones in history to have done that. So this is not going to be a discussion that's trying to make anyone feel defensive. White Europeans are pretty notorious for feeling defensive about this topic because we're the latest culprits of spreading this kind of mind virus, which is like a cannibalistic, extractive, colonizing, taking energy. We did not create it. White Europeans did not create that. This concept of like a human mind virus exists prior to white settler colonial practices. But what I'm being shown in terms of this sort of global idea of extraction, the way it came to me this morning was through waking up and having a memory surface for me that always brings me a lot of sadness when I think about it. And it's related to a matriarch in my family. Hazel is my grandmother Thelma's oldest sister. She was the oldest child of, I think there were 11 children that my great-grandmother Elizabeth had. And Hazel was her oldest child and her oldest daughter. And so by default, just based on the kind of colonial settler practice at that time, my Aunt Hazel was like a second mother to all of her siblings, including my grandmother. She didn't really have a childhood. Because my great-grandmother was sort of this pioneering spirit in that she got divorced 2 times in her era. That was not typical, right? And so it was a big deal. She had to really scrape to survive and feed all of those children because there weren't things in place like child support and, stuff like that. And I don't necessarily know enough about my grandmother's story to know what prompted her pursuit to stand on her own business and get divorced 2 times. I don't know exactly. She was a very teetotaling Christian woman. She went to her grave very much, non-cussing, don't drink, but very kind-hearted, a wonderful, wonderful spirit in my life, my great-grandmother. And so the sad memory around my Aunt Hazel has to do with, my Aunt Hazel became a second matriarch in on my dad's matriarchal line, right? And was very beloved in my family. She had a very generous heart, a very generous soul. She had beautiful dimples, an incredible smile. She was just the epitome of loving, really loving, uplifted, light energy, really great humor, very devoted woman and friend. She had 1 biological child of her own, and the rest of her parenting really was to her own siblings. And like I said, I think she had 11. But this part of the story that makes me sad is that because this all occurred in an extraction, settler, colonial sort of mind virus construct, this life that she lived, it's like she was thrown away, like many elders are in this culture in the United States. And when she outlived everyone around her just about in her own immediate nuclear family, she outlived her son, she outlived her husband, and then only had one granddaughter, right? So she had a very limited, immediate nuclear family, but she was so beloved in my dad's family. And yet, when she was aging and outliving everyone who would be the natural, obvious, like, caretakers for her in her very elder years, this even hurts to talk about. But I'm aware now that part of the reason this memory has stayed with me the way it has is because it's to say her name here and honor her life. My sisters and I tried to varying degrees, but we also came up in this extractive culture, and women's roles are not valued. So my sister tried to take care of her. Her own daughter tried to take care of her, but they're also raising their own children and also having to work outside the home, plus raise children, plus take care of an elder, right? Like, these are the problems with extractive capitalism that doesn't recognize the value of women's work. So my Aunt Hazel, my family has the heart that it even has the capacity to have amongst all of its wounds because of my Aunt Hazel and my grandmother Thelma. And yet in their latest years, my Aunt Hazel really was abandoned. She had a roof over her head and she had food. My dad made sure of that. Nobody visited, nobody included her, and that's what happens to elders in this extraction culture. And so for white European settler ancestry folks here, there's often kind of a feeling of like, well, who are we if not the bad guys? Like, that's sort of the white settler ancestry perspective, is feeling defensive about the fact that we're the ones that have carried out these atrocities. Now we're in power and we can't reconcile our own feelings of ancestral guilt or need to make atonement. And so it manifests in all kinds of weird ways, like projecting on the very, descendants of the people who we harmed instead of getting right in our own hearts, right? And so this is how it looks in our own lives and in our own families and in our own communities. Forget the way that people outside of white settler colonial society is telling us that they need us to hear them more. What are we? My Aunt Hazel needed us as a family, and we abandoned her because we were in the water of white settler colonialism that didn't value the heart and soul that she poured into raising the family and the family's survival and the family's emotional survival and the family's emotional joy and sense of safety and security. She provided most of that along with my grandmother, and they never received any recognition for it. Their thanks was in the end of their life, not so much my grandmother, but my Aunt Hazel was alone. And she would even say, I don't know what I'm doing here, because that last years of her life, it was not months, it was years that she lived like that, basically in total isolation, and was supposed to feel lucky when once a year someone came and visited. And this is not an indictment of her daughter by any means. Her daughter is the one that upheld her name and life the most. We didn't support her, and her daughter struggled to meet her own family's needs. So this is what I'm talking about. This is where if we start doing our own healing around stuff like this, maybe we can stop the mind virus from continuing. So I want to just really honor my Aunt Hazel's memory, because every time I picture her sitting alone in her apartment, like, it got to the point where she didn't even watch TV. She just sat, because even the TV made her lonely, and so she just would sit. She got up, she got dressed every day, she set her hair, she made herself food. She, at some point, didn't have a pet anymore because she was worried about being able to take care of the pet. And so she was completely alone and would just sit in silence in the apartment and wonder, what am I still doing here? And that happened for years. And if there's one thing I can do, it's tell that story so that it didn't have to be in vain. That's where we need to keep our own house right now. Why are we throwing our elders away, right? It's not like I'm the first person to say these things, but I'm being called to say them right now, so that's what I'm doing. Why is matriarchy and women's work in this culture not valued? Why is women's bodily safety not valued? Why was it okay to throw a person away like my Aunt Hazel, basically? My dad loved her, but if she needed my dad's help, my dad would often get angry, and then what he would do is come to me and talk to me as if teaching me a lesson about, you need to get more independent because look at what happened to your Aunt Hazel. She needs my help all the time and I resent it. As if that was a problem after everything she gave our family for years and years and years of herself. when her time of need came at the end of her life, my dad resented it. And I don't like saying that about my dad, but it's the truth. And he passed that on to us. You don't need to go visit her. You have your own life. Go be with your friends. Like, he didn't want to feel burdened, so he unburdened us and then saddled me with a burden of guilt that we should never have abandoned her, right? So can you look in your own network and your own family, if you're of subtle or colonial ancestry, and see, like, did my family system get taught to value women's work, right? Like, other cultures still have that intact, but somewhere along the line, white subtle or colonial overculture in the West is losing that. We're losing, like, the soul of our culture by doing that. And by negating women and by shitting on women in the public arena, mocking their desire to feel bodily safe and secure in this culture. What can you do for this feeling right now? I want my Aunt Hazel to rest in peace, and I want to thank her and thank her memory for all of the love that she gave us, gave to my brother, gave to us when our dad couldn't be there because he was working, when our mom was either, for in my siblings' case, being a narcissist, and in my case, dead, right? There was my Aunt Hazel, there was my grandmother, and her thanks at the end of her life was that she was abandoned in an apartment. So if you're experiencing that feeling of abandonment right now, this is what's in play here for us. There's 2 pages right next to one another. So it's almost like we're in an emerging consciousness about, can we start over? Can we do something new? Can we renew the communication here? Can we renew our passion? Can we renew an effort that's heart-centered and that's based on creativity? These are the cornerstone cards here. This Page of Cups and this Page of Wands. So it's masculine energy. It's young, masculine page communicative energy that's being highlighted here, of the fire element and the water element. And fire and water have been coming up a lot in my readings lately, especially here's this Ace of Wands as well. And another thing that's interesting, the only major arcana card here is the Hierophant, which is a spiritual masculine energy. So we're tapping into maybe your personal experience as the viewer and as the listener of, where is the spiritual heart of the men in my community? Is it present? Is it not? That's a reckoning that's been happening culturally for quite a while. It's in being reflected here in this Tetractys. And there's a feeling of sorrow about it. Like, have men lost their way, you're wondering, maybe? Is it even gendered? Like, is it something that is a problem that lies with men? Or is it a problem that lies with capitalism? Is it a problem, right? These are like the questions you might be asking yourself right now. Maybe in a new way, maybe in a different way than you've never asked before. There's some sorrow with it. Like me telling that story about my Aunt Hazel, to me that's a shameful story in a way, because it doesn't make my family look good. It makes us look bad. But it's by recognizing this is how it shows up in my world. Another way is where I live. I live on the lower Columbia River, also known as the Nichiwana River, in Chinook and Cowlitz territory. This part of the river has been so treated as a commodity extraction, either through fishing, through canning, through barge transport, through industrial corridor, right? The Columbia River is considered a federal industrial waterway. So the relationship of the people that have grown up here where I live treat it as if it's not valuable or a living spirit. They trash it, they poach from it, they pour glass into it, they pour, and so there's this culture that we inherited that we have to be seeing our way out of, where we are not so much trying to understand, well, it seems like it's important that we go within. Sorry, now I feel like I'm going all over the place and I didn't want to do that. So you're in a period of stillness, of looking at all of this and taking stock, which isn't surprising if you're in North America. We are in that process through an election, and a lot of people are very devastated with the outcome of the election. Your vulnerability is that you feel like you are on fire to make change, but you don't know where to go with the energy or what to do. or things may feel too overwhelming. The results of the election or the results of the powers that be reasserting themselves, so kind of indisputably has you in your sense of feeling in inner conflict and powerlessness a little bit, of not knowing how to break out of this trapped or frustrated feeling of conflict, and like, why does this keep happening, or why do I keep having to face this? Well, it might be helpful to face ourselves, right? Start doing the inner work. Your vulnerability, the devil on your shoulder wants you to turn to a strong leader, like a priest or like a far-right leader in this case, because it's a vulnerability and we're talking about extraction, and extraction capitalism is associated with the right wing at this point, and the left and the Democratic Party, if we're just being real. And so that's where the vulnerability is you're like, all of my leaders that I have been following are leading me where, right? Like, again, this theme of the Crusades or of manifest destiny or extraction capitalism. This is going deep in this card reading, and it's because you're here because you probably are in alignment with me to some degree about this, and you're feeling this stuff in your body right now, especially if you're in North America or in the West, right? You're realizing like the illusions have fallen. The emperor has no clothes. It's not the emperor, it's the high priest, but it's in a vulnerability position. For you and your conscious mind, you're like, my understanding of the old way is over. I recognize that old way is not going to make it. And it's scary. Like, I was just talking to another friend the other day who was like, well, I'm getting ready to buckle in for scary times. And trying to look, she was saying, I'm trying to look at it like things are going to get really rough before they get better. And this is a necessary part of the arc towards getting better. That's how they're looking at it, but they're definitely looking at it as like a before and after. Less so for me personally, but I'm not talking about me here because my before and after happened a while ago. So I'm not quite taking it as hard personally as many like maybe white settler colonial Americans might be right now, right? Where the energy is headed is learning how to not cry over spilt milk, learning how to move forward with the 2 cups that are still standing. That's what's in play for you. And so you might be figuring out, so just take it easy. That's first and foremost. It's a marathon, not a race. Where can you look inside your own home, inside your own heart, inside your own mind, where you might be having a colonized mindset and upholding colonial things? Like me, for instance, another example, like where I live is Chinook Cowlitz land. This is land that I purchased with another person. And so land back, right? Like that's my task. How do I see that this land that I currently have ownership over goes to the Chinook, this is the Chinook land. Like I could sign it over to them right now, and my current will says that my assets go to the Chinook, but that's land back later, right? So I've got to reconcile, what about land back now? What does that look like? Like how do I make land back a reality? As a white colonial, is it going and being in solidarity and ally like at Standing Rock, right? What is that for you? This is the process that you're entering. Hope is important. As you walk away from the old, it can give you hope. It did that for me, and that's what I was telling my friend, because I'm an anarchist. And for a lot of people, the concept of anarchy is terrifying. They either see people in black bloc, or they see just lawlessness and crime everywhere and like total destruction, post-apocalypse, right? And it's like, no, read about it. Anarchy is not that, especially if you're approaching it with wisdom and intelligence. There are people that have gone before us, the Spanish anarchists, right? It's doing things related to mutual aid. Even in the United States, there's a history of it with things like the Eagles Club and the Moose Lodge and stuff like that. Those are groups based on mutual aid. That is a type of anarchy of like, we don't need governing overlords to force us to be good to each other. If we assume our own authority and personal agency and ethics, we can do it without being forced. We don't need an authoritarian leader to militarize us into being good and shutting up, right? We need to exercise our own liberation and minds and creativity to come together and find either like an autonomous community or whatever, right? That's anarchy. Giving each other hot meals, rotating, caring for each other's kids, that's anarchy, right? That's where women are empowered and their work is recognized. So there's hope for you in looking at, it doesn't have to be anarchy, that's where I found mine, but yours might be somewhere else, like in the Green Party or in green, you know, there's all different ways that you can plug into something new now that you've realized the old way is clearly not going to save me. I need the new. It doesn't have to be political. It can be in your family. Like, I married this person and thought this was going to be my ticket to my personal joy and salvation, and it turned out to be a nightmare, and now I need to get divorced, and who knows what's coming next. It can look any number of ways, but this is like how to liberate yourself from that feeling of being taken from without getting anything in return. And I think I think it's probably safe to say that people who identify as women or non-binary or trans in the United States right now, many people feel like that. I'm not speaking for everyone. Clearly lots of women and people of color voted for Trump. It's not about party for me anymore. But, you know, we're just going to talk about it because it's real and it's happening. And I'm someone who looks at the global stuff. I don't just look at personal drama in my card readings. So keeping up hope while you walk away and readjust to the paradigm shift that you're like, oh, wow, I want to step out of the extraction mindset and into a cooperative mindset, right? Yeah, that's going to race you to your success with this Chariot card. That's where you'll find your community of cooperation. I love it. This is so beautiful. It's like once you've now accepted what is staring you right in the face, this party is not coming to rescue you. Kamala Harris is not going to rescue you. Kamala Harris is not going to single-handedly protect your right to choose, right? All of that stuff. Where has the Democratic Party been for the last several decades when they could have shored up Roe, right? These are ways that it's looked for me. So they might look like that for you. That's why I'm saying this. Where was the Democratic Party for my Aunt Hazel? They kind of came through for her. Some of the benefits that she had helped her be able to bodily survive, but where was the culture of valuing elders instead of throwing them away because they no longer produce capital, right? That's what we're talking about here. You don't have to become a communist. I'm not a communist, right? It doesn't have to look anything like that. It can look in a myriad of ways, again, like I said. So if you're feeling a little resentful or taken from or put upon, or like, I'm tired, I'm fed up, I'm tired of asking for some basics in return in this nation or family or whatever, and I'm not getting it, this is your threshold into the new. What will it look like for you now that you're going to be all, we're not going to take it. That just came through. It makes me happy. That's the kind of, like, joy. They can't take our joy. Fuck them. Fuck those bullshit thinking they are going to rule the world through their crap, right? They're not. They don't. We are power. Like, oh God, I keep wanting to say John Legend, which is embarrassing. It's not John Legend. The former AIM guy, he did a lecture called We Are Power. John Trudell, sorry, there we go. Yeah, this is where your new stability is, in finding your way out of that old paradigm, walking away and recognizing that your hope is in a new paradigm. And I'm not saying like, you know, you'll know what this means if it's for you. So what's some good parting words? What are some good parting words for you as you're having this kind of awakening about needing to leave the old way behind? This has been coming up a lot in readings, and it's partly because it's coming up for me personally, and because probably the people on my channel share some of my, you know, share this kind of perspective to an extent. I'm still trying to decide now on live streaming and when I'm going to live stream. Breathe deeply and replenish yourself. Rest. So meditating right now through these kinds of questions you're asking yourself. In the stillness, some of the answers will come. You must turn it over to fate. So if you're a prayerful person, you can say, where's my new path? Like, where do I go next? The old way is ending for me and I want a new path, right? It involves an ancestral pattern. Look to your lineage or bloodline. So this is that for you. This is maybe you're somebody who lives in the Americas or in a part of the world that has been impacted by settler extraction colonialism, and you're trying to figure out, where is my place in the shifting order, because the old way is dying. We're coming into a new age. It's all over in all different ways you look at it. Either astrologically, politically, spiritually, right? It's everywhere. So you're in the thick, you're in the morass of all of that and trying to figure out, like me, where's our new place now that the sands are shifting, right? So I'm honored. Thank you. And thank you for listening to my Aunt Hazel's story. That's a really painful and tender memory. And it's the least I can do to uplift her name here and pay her the respect that, at least in my soul, I haven't been very at rest about the way that her end of life happened. I don't speak for anyone in my family. I don't indict anyone in my family. It's a personal wound that I think is part of my healing to tell her story here. So thank you.